If you have a series of events that you want to communicate to someone, then putting that on a timeline or a Gantt chart is a great way to give someone a visual, at-a-glance overview of that information. Hi, I'm Pamela Schultz, and in this video, you're going to learn how to use DataGraph for macOS in order to create timelines and Gantt charts that cover interactive timelines, timelines that use data, as well as timelines for planning purposes. This video is actually the 7th video in our fall webinar series. And what we've done is we've divided up the recording of the webinar into 5 different parts. The first part is going to show you how to set up a basic timeline. And the second part will show you an interactive timeline where you can have individual events that you highlight as well as a range of time that is all interactive. In the third part, we're going to take tables of data where you have a list of dates and make a graphic of that. In fact, I used the spring calendar for the University of North Carolina for that example. And in the fourth part, we're looking at ranges of dates. This is showing you a timeline of classical musical composers throughout history. And the last part of the video is going to show you how you can use DataGraph to plan out events. Specifically, in this example, we're going to look at a day where you're running an experiment and you know different tasks and the amount of time that they take, and you can use DataGraph to see when should you start your experiment depending on what time you want to go home that day. In total, there are 4 different files that we created for this demonstration. You can get all of them in the DataGraph online example files. And if you don't have DataGraph, then go into the description of this video and get a link to download a free trial. The video recording is going to start with the first file in that list, the interactive timeline, and show you how to set it up from scratch. So if you wanted to create this on your own, you'll notice, again, this is not coming from data. It's literally just coming from these label commands that I have set up here. Let's go ahead and just make a brand new graph so I can show you a little bit of this from scratch. The data that I do have here is a range that shows you the beginning and it shows you the ending. And this is 1 year. So I set this up to be a 1-year timeline. Now for DataGraph to put things on a date scale, you have to have something plotted from the data table that is using a date column. And these 2 columns here are both set up to be date columns, and they look like dates. So that makes sense. But we need to again graph them on the data. So graph them on my graph. So the way that I would recommend doing this is by using a lines command, which you can access from the draw menu. You'll see it's right here. Lines, draw 1 or more vertical or horizontal lines. Let's go ahead and add one of these lines commands. And by default, it shows you the vertical line. We want this to be horizontal. So I'm going to make this a Y line. So I just changed the type here to Y line. You can see by default, it's just giving me a line at 0. But if you open this up, and it's extending across whatever is on the x-axis, but there's not anything on the x-axis yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to say the extent is something we're going to specify. So that's right here, changing the extent to specify. And then what the lines command does is it gives you the ability to specify a lower and upper value for the line that we're going to have. So I'm going to say my lower value is my beginning value here and my ending value here. Now what you'll notice is, sure enough, now I have dates along my x-axis. I still have this line here. And I don't necessarily need to show the Y numbers if I don't want to. We'll leave them for the moment. Well, actually, let me hide them. I will hide the Y numbers, and I'll hide even that line. And basically what you see here now is this single timeline along the bottom of my axis. Now I'm going to add these interactive elements. When you do that, I do recommend for a approach like this, where I'm not actually graphing any data. I'm really just going to be putting labels within this domain, it's good actually to give DataGraph a range for a Y value, even though there's no data here. And if you started adding some labels and dragging them around, you'd see DataGraph would be trying to adjust what the range is, and you might have things kind of flying off this off the graph. So what I always do is I would say, let's just put, for example, 0 to 1 within the Y range. Now, if you want to just look at it, yep, here's value 0 to 1. If I want to know exactly the range, I could say the padding is 0. But now I can add some elements, and I have a fixed canvas that I'm working with. So let's add those elements. Even though I'm hiding this Y line from the view, I can go ahead and go up to my toolbar and find where there is the label command and just add that. Okay, easy enough. I can drag this around. Now, if I want to have my label pinned to the x-axis, so if you go to this first graph in this file, you see how when I drag these around, they stay on the x-axis. I actually can't drag them into the middle, even if I wanted to right now. And that's because these are set to be positioned specifically on the x-axis. I can go back to the one that I'm working on, and I can change this to position x-axis. And sure enough, it's going to then snap right down to that location. Then I can drag it around. The other thing that I want to do is I want this label to change depending on what date it's pointing to. I can do that by going into my command, and to the right-hand side of the, where I would otherwise just enter text, you can click that to see the available tokens. And one of the tokens that you can get, this is like a text variable that will show up within the label, is the X value where it's pointing. I'm going to select that, hit the enter key, and then you'll see how there is now my text, and the date is also there. Let's put a space between them for starters. I can do that. I guess I put a point there too. And I can also do a \n, and that will force a new line. So now I've got the beginnings of this. I can move this around. It shows me the dates. I can format the dates that's shown, since this is all for 2025. If you click on the token, you'll see all these different options for how you can view the date. I'm going to choose month/day. Now this is getting closer to the graph that you see here, which has them like this. The other thing, I guess, that I really want to make sure you realize about these interactive elements is how I can copy and paste them. So I've made one that's getting close to what I want. Let me go ahead and add a couple more. So you can copy and paste, literally Control-C, Control-C, Control-V, or edit, copy, edit, paste. I like to hold the Option key, click and drag, make a couple of these, and then move them around. So now all the dates are going to update for all of these. I can change the text formatting. But what's really nice about these label commands, if I go ahead and select them all and then use my right arrow to open them up, is that if I want to change some of the styling, so say, for example, I really don't like it when these lines are on a slant. I like it when they have this kind of a, up and down a view, boxy view. So to do that, you can change the line style on one of your label commands and change it to that first entry below the default value. And sure enough, you see now, if you click and drag the text, it's going to move that text back and forth. Or if I click and drag where there's a straight line, it moves the whole thing. Other things I might want to change. I might want to change my arrow size to be either larger or smaller. I can change the arrow style. But as I change these things, maybe I'll even just change the color so that this will be even clearer, and the width. So if I have an arrow here and I really like what that looks like, I don't want to have to change it for all of these. So the labels command has this handy little button that is set all. So if you click that button, now all of my label commands have that formatting. So I only need to change it in one place. So that's how I get the interactive elements like you see here. The other thing that I want to show you before I move on to the next examples using data is how I can add a range that I can also move back and forth. So the range command is something that is also located or is located under the label menu. You see it's right here. So if you want to go ahead and add one of these, let's click add and see what happens. Now, what happened? My timeline just changed and suddenly it goes all the way back to 1970. Well, the reason is that DataGraph uses what's referred to as an epoch time. We use a Unix standard for the epoch time, which means that times are really dates and times are numbers. And they are what we use is the number of seconds since 1970. If you've never heard of this before, it might sound kind of strange, but this is a standard that's used by a lot of computational programs. So what happened here is I added this range, and by default, it is set to go from 0 to 1. 0 is the first day of 1970. So it actually adjusted the scale on my graph to accommodate this range command that I just added. How do I get this to be within the years that I'm working with? Well, I can enter a date string, and in DataGraph, in fact, hovering over this, if I can get that back again. Here it is. When I hover over this box, I actually didn't even know that it gave you this. This is handy. It shows you that you can specify dates using year, month, day, or you can do year, month, day, hour, minute, and it gives you an example of that. So since this is a date line, it's telling me how I can specify this. So I'm going to say 2025, and let's say 0301 for the first date, and let's see 015 or the 15th for the second date. So I just want to get this in the right range so that I can see it. Now, once it's there, I can drag this around and move it and highlight a location within my graph. And if I want this to be behind, then I need to drag it up to the top because DataGraph is going to draw each element as it sees them in the list. And that's essentially what we have here. Couple of other things in this file that you'll notice. You'll see how there is the text label within this, within this range command. That text label is something that is coming from, actually, if you don't know this, it's important to realize that anything you click on in DataGraph, it will show you where it is within the command list. So if I click on an element in the graph, it's going to highlight the associated location of that. Because this is in the group, it highlights the group. And here is the text object. Text commands by default are aligned to the corner based on pixels. But here what I've done is I've changed my text command. That's one that I added from here. If you're not familiar with that, this text command right here. It's set to be at a specific coordinate. That's this. And I'm actually calculating what that coordinate is because from any of these interactive elements, either the labels or from the range command, you can, this is maybe a little more advanced if you're newer to DataGraph, but I can extract those values using the gear menu as variables, and that's what I have down here. So I have the minimum and maximum value of my range. And again, if you do this, you might say, well, what are these numbers? They're so large. That's not a date. Some of the variables, we have made sure that if it's a date, it sort of knows it and it will represent it as a date. These are not doing that. So something we could possibly add into some of these variables. But as long as you know, this is showing you the seconds to from 1970 that this date is. It is, when it's plotted back, it's going to show me a date. And I can use these in calculation. So I'm literally calculating the midpoint of this range, and that's the location that I am putting this text in. So I've created, again, this interactive element with the label there. Okay, I'm ready to move on to the next part. Oh, I guess, oh, no. Let me show you one more thing. So this is really cool, and I think this is worth pointing out. So this formatting, you see how I have this kind of cool alternating formatting between every month? This is also done using a range command. So in this case, if I look at the range command, I have told it in the x-axis that I want you to use dates. So this is different than the range command, well, even that's within here, where I'm just interactively changing the location of this. Here, I added a range command and I said, my x-axis is dates, and I want you to alternate based on months. And then it automatically will, whatever color I have here, so I've set this to a fill color that you see, it's going to give that value. And what I've done is I've just repeated the same thing also for even months, and that's what the sort of salmon color is coming from. So that's something you can kind of experiment with, but I thought this gave a really nice look. And I even set up a little variable so that the Y value for these ranges is going to be the same, and I can adjust the height of the look of that timeline to give me a bit more of a schematic kind of a look. So how did I create this? This is now where I have a list of dates and I have a calendar event, and I've also added in what the type of the event is. Now, I got this from the website that you see here, and notice, I just thought that this was really cool because the dates that are on the UNC calendar are not numeric. They actually have the day of the week, the month, and the calendar day. That's okay because I can specify that as a string within DataGraph, and it understands what day this is without me having to, type in the same date. So you can, again, notice from the corner of this, that icon indicates that this is a date column. Also over here, this is a date column. And what I chose for this, the type is an ICU day. If you're not familiar with this, not everyone needs to use this, but it is handy to note that you can specify your own date string. And the format here is the letter E, capital M, lowercase d. Though that's, again, not something we came up with. This is a standard formatting string. If you want to learn more about this and see all the different options that are available, click that question mark. It'll bring you to the help page for the date column where you can get more information on the ICU format strings. But I thought this was a great example of how, I could just take this raw data exactly as it is on the calendar and use it within my DataGraph file once I set the format string properly. Okay, so here, in order to create this graph, let me just do a quick version of this. I want to have as you see here, the x-axis is my date and the y-axis is my event. So to do this, to start it, I would just select these two columns, and I'm going to use a points command. Okay, so I created this. This doesn't look exactly like this one yet, but I'm going to show you a little bit more of how to get that there. So first of all, the spacing for my axis, if I want to add more Y space, I can make it extra wide. That still isn't necessarily enough. So if you go into your axis settings, you can change the space for Y to exactly, and then you can make this much, much wider. And the order of events right now, the first event is listed at the bottom. I want it to be reversed, so I can change my Y type to be reversed. Now this looks very much like the one that you see here. The only difference is that I have added this color scheme to the points, and I've also added the label. So if you go into the command here, you can see the color scheme that I've added, and the label is added. Let's see, here it is. right here. The date is added as the label. And I've also changed the formatting to again, show me just the month and the day. So that's something that you can play with that. The other nice thing here, again, is using this range command. So if I want to add a background, I'll show you here, adding the range command. This is the point here. I just go to the X interval, and instead of saying interval, I'm going to change this to dates. Oops. And by default, it says years. I want to change this to months, for example. And now you can see how it alternates the color for every month. Let's move it also to the back. Or I thought for this length of a calendar, having it alternate on a weekly basis was kind of a handy thing to do. So that's what I did here. And then again, I just changed the color in the background to be a little bit of a lighter color to offset the color scheme. I thought that looked kind of nice. And I really like this example. I played with this chart a lot. We have an older Gantt chart example that had some classical music composers listed. I added more composers to that. And what you see in this file is a ranking, the date born, the date of death, the name, the country, and then a short name, a last name here. And so the first graph is just a simpler Gantt chart, and we create this with the connect command. So let me go ahead and show you how can I do this. Now, in the previous version where I had data for individual dates and I used a point command to show that, I could just pre-select the data and then boom, my data was all on my graph. The connect command does not have any ability to pre-select the data. So you can go ahead and just, if you add a new graph, go to the draw menu, and here's where the connect command is. This is one of my favorite commands. It can do so many cool things. So just add that. And what you see is the X and the Y. You have a beginning X and Y, a beginning X and an ending X, beginning Y, ending Y. They're initially just specified all as 0, 0, 0. So it's not actually drawing any lines. But what I can do is I can take the date born and make that my X1, the date of death, and make that my X2. Now I see a line here, but I only see one line. And that's because all these lines now are just being drawn at the same Y location. So I'm going to change the Y location to be the rank of the composer. And then you see, yay, my Gantt chart appears. I can really stylize this to increase the width of the line and change the end caps to rounded. That gives that kind of nice pill-shaped look for the Gantt chart. A couple of other things we're going to want to do here. We want, again, to reverse the order. We haven't labeled them yet, but we will need to reverse the Y. And now I want to add the names of the composers. I can actually do that by going here into the axis settings and just specify that I want my Y labels, or that my Y values not to be the rank, because I want them to actually be labels that are whatever the rank location is, whatever the value is here. And I want the labels to show me the full name of my composer. Again, I want more space for my Y labels. Let's go ahead and increase that. And I'm also going to change the padding to make it more even for the Y values to say 5% or 10%. And now this is, again, starting to really come together. Other things that you can do here, you can add a label onto the line that the connect command is drawing. That's what I have here in these graphs. So if I go onto my connect command and I use, for example, the last name column is much shorter, so it's a little bit easier to fit here, and make that the label, by default, it's going to just put it to the left. But what I did in these graphs is I said, actually, I want to change the label, let's see, label position is the thing you want to change. Change it from start to middle. Now I can't see it because my font is black. So change your font to something that's not black if you still have a black color for the connect commands, and then you see the names there. And what's kind of cute about this is if I now want to change the rank. So I'm not a classical music aficionado by any means. I enjoy listening to classical music now and again. But actually, when I looked at this data and then put it on this Gantt chart, I thought it was pretty interesting, because when you look at how early on Bach was compared to the other classical composers, we're talking, 100 years before some of these other composers. And that Vivaldi and Handel, both the same time period, they were so far ahead of other composers, which personally, I didn't really know that was the case, because I don't know music history, I guess, that well. But I thought that was really interesting to see it like that. But if you don't think that Johann Sebastian Bach is the number one ranked, or should be number one, then you could change this. And, maybe you think he should be more number three, or whatever you think he should be. So you can, this is all now set up to be very dynamic. So it will change the location of where each of these are shown based on whatever I type in for this rank column. Or if I want to change it back again, I can do that too. And again, here, there's a range command that's shown to give me a sense of the time scale. This is actually in centuries. So you can see every 100 years, there's a different background. And then finally, this command also has the ability to have a color scheme. So I set up some colors here, and you have this based on the birth country, and here's the colors that are associated with each of these. And the color scheme is shown using the command here, that is the custom legend. If you're not familiar with how to do that, then you can ask me about that. This is just, again, taking a different approach, but letting you use DataGraph in order to plan out some type of events. And here what we have are tasks that are listed according to the number of hours these tasks are going to take. And to kind of show you a little bit how this gets pulled together, I'm going to just put this list in a new file, just so I can have you see this a little bit here. Because again, if you're not used to doing some of these things in DataGraph, you might not be aware that some of these actions even exist. So first of all, I've set up my list of tasks. These could be based on days or, weeks or whatever time scale you want. But here, this is meant to be one day. I'm planning out my experiment. I have all these tasks I need to do. I've estimated how long they're going to take. First of all, I want to know the total amount of time these are going to take. To do that, I can right-click on this column, and there's an expression shortcut that's called a cumulative sum. I'm going to select that. And when I do, it adds an expression column, and you'll see the expression over here. You can also just manually add an expression column and type this in, hours.isum. So this is the total number of hours. So that's relatively quick to do. And then what we want to do is we want to estimate, again, what time this experiment is going to start based on some criteria. And so what I did in the file here is I took this total and I also added a variable here called end. And this is just typed in. I do have to type this in as hours, minutes, and seconds for DataGraph to understand this properly. You don't have to type in the full date if you don't want to. You can, but you don't have to. So this could be any given day, and in the background there is a day that DataGraph is, but I don't necessarily need to know that. I just have my hours, minutes, my seconds, and in this expression, what I'm doing is I'm taking my, I guess I didn't completely finish this, because I calculate then based on when I want to end the experiment. This is in military time, in the 24-hour clock time. So this would be at 10 p.m. is when I want to end my experiment, given the amount of hours that my experiment is taking. So this is the sum of this column. This is another thing you can do with shortcuts. If you do number from column, click sum, it will create a variable just like this one. So it's a total of 17 hours. I can take my end time and subtract from it the number of hours. Now, the trick here is that, again, all the dates and times, anything that is represented by a date or a time is in seconds. So I have to take my hours and I have to do a conversion for this to be seconds. But when I do, now it's giving me the seconds for the start time. And I can use those then to calculate both the end and the beginning of my experiment. And this file, just to point out, this is completely dynamic. So if you were going to, you had something you wanted to plan a day out, doesn't have to be a day. You can do the same thing again for longer time periods. But if you had something you wanted to make sure you wrapped up by a certain time, then we could make this maybe a bit of a more reasonable time. So now I have this wrapping up here, whatever I'm going to do, by 6 p.m. So I have that end value showing up here as AM PM time. And then for all of my tasks, again, I could change what these are and change the time period. So maybe this only takes me an hour for these. Then you notice how my experimental plan updates. That's a much better time frame. I only have to start my experiment at 9 a.m. instead of first thing, very, very, very early in the morning. And again, all of these are set up using the things that we talked about. There's a formatting string. Now, in this case, the formatting string is actually set up using a text expression column, and that gives us a place where we can combine various numerical values, dates, text into one label column here. I also have these \n's to indicate where I want things to go on different lines. But that's how I'm creating these labels here. I don't think for any of these files, I didn't size anything. So that's something to keep in mind. So if you wanted to say, publish this, this is an experimental plan that you wanted to put into a paper, I always tell people you still have to make sure that you go ahead and change the sizing of the graph to specified. The font that you see that I have here may not be the right font for your document or your presentation. So you would need to likely make that smaller so that things would fit. So here, for example, the default being a 5:3, an 8-point font or maybe a 10-point font would be, even the 10-point it does seem a little bit big, doesn't it? Font sizes on your screen are definitely very different than what you would want them to be in your document. But that's where you need to kind of just keep that in mind as you're formatting. So this would probably be a perfect size that I could copy and paste directly into a document and be good to go. Great, thank you. Excellent. Appreciate that. So I'm not seeing any questions, which is totally fine. I maybe went a little bit fast through some of this, but please, go through some of these templates and maybe see if you can mimic what I did. If it wasn't clear, see if you can get the same result. I find the calculations of the dates to be kind of a cool thing. And in each of these, where I'm doing a date calculation, actually, one of the really important things to keep in mind is that you're using an expression column, but you do need to make sure you change the type to a date. Otherwise, you are just going to be calculating numbers. And again, if I change this to a number, it's going to show you the value in seconds. So this is the seconds since 1970. That is the underlying, how dates are actually saved and computed. But if I just change this type to a date and I have the formatting specified, so I can tell DataGraph to display it in a way that I want to see it. Again, I'm using this ICU format string, and the format string I picked here, and this is sort of handy. There's a pop-up that will show you what the different strings are and what they mean. So I just did a format string that gives me the K, a big capital K is the hour for AM, PM, and then I have the lowercase m's is the minutes, and then the little a is the AM, PM marker. So that's how I'm creating this custom formatting for the time that you see here. Thanks for watching our video. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead and put them in the description of the video. You can also contact us, help@visualdatatools.com. If you have ideas for other videos you'd like us to do, feel free to send them along. And of course, if this was helpful, we appreciate if you like and subscribe to our channel. You can also watch all the other videos that are in our fall series that we've been doing this year. Thanks.